World War I, also known as the Great War, was a global conflict that raged from 1914 to 1918. It involved many of the world's great powers, which were divided into two opposing alliances, the Allies and the Central Powers. The war began after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, which set off a chain reaction of events leading to widespread hostilities. It was a war unlike any the world had ever seen before. The scale and intensity of the conflict were unprecedented, with battles fought on multiple fronts across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Millions of soldiers from across the globe were locked in a brutal struggle, fueled by nationalism, imperialism, and a complex web of alliances. The war saw the mobilization of over 70 million military personnel, making it one of the largest wars in history. The war left an indelible mark on human history, shaping the political, social, and economic landscape of the 20th century. The aftermath of the war saw the collapse of empires, the rise of new nations, and significant shifts in global power dynamics. The scale of the war was unprecedented. Entire cities and regions were devastated, and the human cost was staggering, with millions of lives lost and countless others forever changed. It drew in nations from every inhabited continent. The global nature of the conflict meant that battles were fought not only in Europe but also in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, making it a truly world war. From the trenches of Europe to the deserts of the Middle East, the battlefields of World War I witnessed unimaginable carnage and destruction. The war introduced new forms of combat, including trench warfare, which led to horrific conditions for soldiers. New technologies of war emerged, forever changing the face of warfare. Innovations such as tanks, airplanes, and chemical weapons were used on a large scale for the first time, altering military strategies and the nature of combat. The Great War shattered empires, redrew national boundaries, and sowed the seeds for future conflicts. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on Germany and set the stage for World War II. Its legacy continues to resonate today, reminding us of the devastating consequences of unchecked aggression and the importance of diplomacy and understanding in a globalized world. The lessons learned from World War I continue to shape international relations and efforts to maintain peace. At the heart of World War I lay a complex interplay of underlying causes. These causes were deeply rooted in the political, social, and economic fabric of Europe at the time. These factors had been brewing for decades, creating an environment ripe for conflict. The rapid industrialization and urbanization of Europe added to the tensions as nations competed for economic dominance. Nationalism, a powerful force in the early 20th century, fueled rivalries between nations. It was not just a sense of pride in one's country, but a belief that one's nation was superior to others. Each country believed in its own superiority and sought to assert its dominance on the world stage. This often led to aggressive foreign policies and a readiness to go to war to defend national honor. Militarism, the glorification of military strength, also played a crucial role. The belief that military power was essential for national greatness led to an arms race among the European powers. European powers engaged in a dangerous arms race, expanding their armies and navies at an alarming rate. This buildup of military might created a sense of inevitable conflict. Military leaders exerted increasing influence on government policy, creating a climate of suspicion and aggression. Governments were often swayed by the advice of their military advisors, leading to more confrontational stances. Adding to the tensions was imperialism, the pursuit of colonial empires. European nations sought to expand their influence and control over territories around the world. European powers competed fiercely for control of territories in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. This competition often brought them into conflict with one another, as they vied for the same lands and resources. This competition for resources and influence led to frequent diplomatic crises and heightened tensions. Treaties and alliances were formed, but they often only served to deepen the divisions. These underlying forces, nationalism, militarism, and imperialism, created a volatile atmosphere in Europe. The intricate web of alliances and rivalries made the continent a tinderbox, ready to ignite. The stage was set for a spark to ignite the powder keg. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 provided that spark, leading to the outbreak of World War I. That fateful spark came on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie, were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist. Princip belonged to a secret society known as the Black Hand, which sought to unite all Serbs under one rule. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand sent shockwaves across Europe. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the assassination on its soil, blamed Serbia for the attack, and issued an ultimatum with deliberately unacceptable terms. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was the catalyst for the outbreak of war. It triggered a chain reaction of events, drawing the great powers into a conflict that would engulf the world. Europe in the early 20th century was a web of alliances. These alliances were meant to deter aggression and maintain peace. However, they ultimately served to escalate the conflict. Germany and Austria-Hungary were bound by a military alliance, as were France, Russia, and Great Britain. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, it set off a chain reaction. Russia, bound by its alliance with Serbia, mobilized its army. Germany, obligated to defend Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia. France, allied with Russia, declared war on Germany. Within days, most of Europe was at war. The alliance system, designed to prevent war, had instead drawn the continent into a devastating conflict. Section 5. New Machines of War. Technology and Terror. World War I witnessed the advent of new and deadly military technologies. These technologies transformed warfare, making the conflict far more brutal and destructive than previous wars. The machine gun, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, became a defining weapon of the war. It gave defenders an unprecedented advantage and contributed to the high casualty rates. Artillery, more powerful and accurate than ever before, rained death and destruction upon the battlefields. Massive artillery bombardments could level entire forests and obliterate enemy trenches. Poison gas, a horrifying new weapon, was first used by the Germans in 1915. Chlorine gas, mustard gas, and other chemical weapons caused excruciating pain and death, instilling terror in the hearts of soldiers. While the war was primarily fought in Europe, it quickly spread to other parts of the world. The British and French colonies in Africa and Asia were drawn into the conflict. Japan, allied with Great Britain, seized German colonies in the Pacific. The Ottoman Empire, allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, became embroiled in a struggle against Russia in the Caucasus. The war had profound consequences for the global economy. European nations, their resources strained by the war effort, turned to their colonies for raw materials and manpower. The war disrupted global trade, leading to shortages and inflation. World War I led to the collapse of several major empires. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, racked by internal divisions and defeated on the battlefield, dissolved in 1918. The Ottoman Empire, once a formidable power, was dismantled after the war, its territories divided among the victors. The Russian Empire, shaken by revolution in 1917, withdrew from the war after signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. The Romanov dynasty was overthrown, and the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, came to power, establishing the world's first communist state. The collapse of these empires reshaped the political landscape of Europe and the Middle East. New nations emerged from the ashes of war, but the peace that followed proved to be fragile and short-lived. In 1919, the victorious Allied powers convened in Paris to negotiate a peace treaty with Germany. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on June 28, 1919, officially ended the war. However, the treaty, rather than establishing a lasting peace, sowed the seeds for future conflicts. The treaty imposed harsh penalties on Germany. Germany was forced to accept responsibility for the war and pay massive reparations to the Allied powers. Germany was also forced to cede territory and disarm, severely limiting its military capabilities. The Treaty of Versailles was widely criticized, even by some within the Allied nations. Economist John Maynard Keynes, a member of the British delegation at Versailles, famously condemned the treaty, arguing that its harsh terms would cripple Germany's economy and lead to future instability. World War I was a watershed moment in human history. It was a conflict that not only reshaped borders, but also redefined the very nature of warfare. The introduction of new technologies and tactics made it one of the deadliest conflicts the world had ever seen. The war left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the political, social, and economic landscape of the 20th century. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war, laid the groundwork for many of the geopolitical tensions that would later erupt into World War II. The war resulted in an estimated 40 million casualties, including both military personnel and civilians. Entire towns and cities were reduced to rubble, and the human cost was staggering. Millions more were left wounded, displaced, or traumatized by the horrors of war. The psychological impact of the conflict was profound, giving rise to what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder. The war also led to profound social and cultural changes. Traditional social structures were upended, and the war accelerated movements for social reform and greater equality. The war challenged traditional gender roles as women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers to support the war effort. This shift laid the foundation for future movements advocating for women's rights and gender equality. The war also had a profound impact on art, literature, and music, giving rise to new artistic movements that reflected the disillusionment and trauma of the war years. Artists and writers sought to capture the grim realities of the conflict and its aftermath. The Great War was a tragedy of immense proportions. Memorials and monuments were erected around the world to honor those who had fallen, serving as a somber reminder of the conflict's devastating impact. It stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation in a globalized world. The lessons learned from World War I continue to resonate today, reminding us of the need for peace and unity.